My boyfriend got wasted at a wedding where I was the maid of honor, made a fool of himself and me, and then lied about parts of it afterward. I'm still trying to process everything that happened. It began when my best friend Claire got engaged to Jay and asked me to be her maid of honor. We'd been inseparable since college, through terrible apartments, heartbreaks, and late-night crying sessions on each other's floors. Helping her plan her wedding wasn't a chore. It was a joy. I wanted everything to be perfect for her. David, my boyfriend, knew every detail. I told him about the fittings, the showers, the hotel, the speeches, not because I was obsessed, but because this was part of my life, and he was supposed to be part of my life too. He seemed supportive, or at least he didn't say otherwise. Then, a few days before the wedding, something changed. One night, as we got ready for bed, he said flatly, "I know you don't want to be involved in this wedding. You'll be glad when it's over." I stared at him. What? I'm happy for Claire. I want to be there for her. He just shook his head. You hate every minute of it. The whole thing's stupid anyway. Why do people even get married? It's just an expensive performance. It stunned me. I laughed it off at first, assuming he was in a bad mood. But over the next few days, the comments continued, sarcastic, bitter, dismissive. You're wasting so much time on this. You look exhausted. Maybe it's a sign. Why do people act like marriage is some huge accomplishment? He was like a dark cloud hovering over every conversation. By the night before the wedding, he asked, "Do you think I really have to go?" Are you serious? I RSVP'd for both of us. My parents are expecting you. Claire's expecting you. He shrugged like it was nothing. Not once did he congratulate Claire or Jay. Not once did he express happiness for them. It was as if my joy somehow threatened him. I didn't realize it then, but he was trying to make me miserable, trying to make me believe the things that mattered to me were meaningless. The morning of the wedding, I was already anxious. David had been late to everything for months, hours late sometimes. He'd claim he lost track of time with his friend Tyler, a guy who didn't work, smoked weed all day, and bragged about not buying into the system. It had become David's lifestyle, too. I'd grown tired of it, but I kept hoping he'd outgrow the phase. Still, I couldn't risk him showing up late and embarrassing me, so I lied. I told him the ceremony started at 1 p.m. when it really started at 4:30. He arrived right on cue, already drunk. I found out later he'd been pounding beers at the bar since the moment he walked in. Then came the humiliation. When the DJ announced the bride and groom, everyone clapped politely. David, however, jumped to his feet, whooping and clapping so loudly that every single head turned. It wasn't joy, it was mockery, a performance. 80 people turned to look at the drunk guy making himself a spectacle. My face burned. My mother, sitting beside him, shot me a look that said everything. What is wrong with him? I wanted to disappear. I found him near the bar. Before I could speak, he said, "My work just called. They need me right away. I have to go." I stared at him. "I told you you took the day off." I know, they didn't think they need me, but something came up. I could see the lie in his eyes. He didn't even try to make it convincing. I didn't argue. I just said, "Fine, go." He left in the middle of my best friend's wedding. When I came home around 2 a.m., he was already there. He had another story ready. Work didn't end up needing me. My phone was glitching, so I couldn't text you. Then I forgot the name of the venue and couldn't get back. The excuses piled up, each one more insulting than the last. He wasn't just lying, he was assuming I was too weak to call him out. I didn't argue. I just went to bed. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The wedding had only exposed what had been wrong for a long time. For 4 years, I'd been protecting David from consequences, from discomfort, from himself. When we met in college, his carefree attitude had seemed exciting. He wasn't chasing grades or a corporate future. He was living in the moment. But I'd grown up. I got a real job, started grad school, and began building a future. David stayed exactly the same. He'd cut his bartending hours, spent his days hanging out with Tyler, and complaining about the world. Every time I talked about my goals, he'd find a way to tear them down. subtly, with jokes or sarcasm. "You're wasting so much time on this. You look exhausted. Maybe it's a sign. Why do people act like marriage is some huge accomplishment?" I didn't see it for what it was: resentment. The wedding wasn't an isolated event. It was the breaking point of years of small sabotages. I called a friend and told her everything. "Are you going to break up with him?" she asked. "I think I have to." Saying it out loud felt like taking a breath after holding it for too long. That night, I told David it was over. He looked genuinely confused. "Are you serious? You're breaking up with me over a wedding?" "It's not about the wedding," I said quietly. "It's about everything. You don't support me. You resent my happiness. You lied to me and embarrassed me. I can't keep doing this." He apologized, but it was hollow. I was already gone. The weeks that followed were chaos. He bombarded me with calls and texts, first begging, then raging. "You're throwing everything away. You'll never find someone like me. I was just having a bad night." He sent drunk voice messages in the middle of the night, full of anger and insults, then apologized the next morning, claiming he didn't mean it. We still shared a lease, and he refused to cooperate. Out of spite, he wouldn't sign the paperwork to remove my name. I couldn't afford to pay double rent, so I couch sent for weeks. Eventually, I called a bartender friend of his and asked when he was working. While he was at his shift, I showed up with friends and boxes. We took everything that was mine: my clothes, books, documents. When he came home to an empty apartment, he unleashed another flood of angry messages, followed by a text that said, "I'm willing to forgive you." That was the moment I finally laughed. Distance made everything clear. David wasn't a monster. He was just a man stuck in his own fear, angry at the world, angry at himself, and taking it out on me. My progress made him feel like he was falling behind, and instead of facing that, he decided to pull me down. And I let him. I lied about times, smoothed over his behavior, and convinced myself he'd grow out of it. But people don't change until they want to. The wedding wasn't the disaster, it was the revelation. Over the next few months, I rebuilt my life. I stayed with friends, finished the semester, and eventually found my own place. A lawyer helped me finally get off the lease. It cost more than I could afford, but it bought me peace. I left everything he had ever paid for behind. Claire was there through all of it. The night before I moved into my new apartment, she brought wine and helped me pack. She said, "I'm proud of you." I told her it shouldn't have gotten this bad. She said, "You're not responsible for his choices. You're only responsible for your own." She was right. People say love is enough to make a relationship work. It isn't. Love without respect is codependency. Love without honesty is just a lie. Love without effort from both people is slow self-destruction. David and I had love once, but it wasn't built on respect or trust or shared vision. It was the illusion that love alone could save us. Sometimes I still think of him, not with anger, but with acceptance. I imagine him still in that same apartment, still hanging out with Tyler, still telling himself that life dealt him a bad hand. But it didn't. He made his choices just like I made mine. And I chose differently. I chose myself, my future, and peace. When I think of Claire's wedding now, I don't feel ashamed. I feel grateful. Because sometimes the worst moments, the humiliations, the heartbreaks, the endings, are the ones that finally wake us up. The man that sabotaged my best friend's wedding didn't ruin my life. He showed me exactly who he was and gave me permission to leave. And that permission changed everything.